the government if and when they take strong corrective measures on national security for national interest with respect to any border situation with China. Friends, any right-thinking person and certainly a responsible opposition party would be alarmed and concerned, as we are, to see China blaming India day in and day out, and China adopting one of the most aggressive postures, even given the standards of Chinese aggression. And the chicken neck, which is an issue of extremely important territorial national integrity and territorial national security, becoming an issue in this very long standoff with China. The third facet of this national security equation is our long-standing relationship with Bhutan, one of our most cherished neighbors, one of our long-standing allies, and a kingdom, neighborhood kingdom, towards whom our commitment has been and should be unwavering. With these three facets I want to discuss with you. We all know, friends, that perhaps in the last 55 years such a serious standoff has not occurred. And I'm not talking merely of destruction of a bunker here or a bunker there, but this very serious eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation. This has been preceded with one of the most humongous number of Chinese incursions and violations. And I was startled to find this figure, friends, which is on the official website. In the last 45 days, 120 Chinese incursions. That's almost at the rate of 3 a day. And if you take the whole year of 2017, which is less than half over, 2017, these incursions have been 240, which is much more than one per day. Unfortunately, it appears this government has been caught napping and has not been able to implement significant accords of recent vintage, of recent origin, forget the old ones, which the UPA government entered into. We were able to contain and control this situation. I've got many details, but I'm going to only cite 2 agreements for you. The line of actual control in India-China border areas agreement, title is this, of April 2005. That is called the line of control agreement, let us call it for short. And the border defense cooperation agreement of October 2013. This base existed, and therefore not only a violation by these repeated transgressions, but a violation in the most sensitive part, which is the area known as the chicken neck. We say this with great responsibility and restraint, but we would be abdicating our responsibility if we did not say it. We have not had only these transgressions, we have not only had destruction of bunkers, we have not only had conflagration, but after a long time, a complete stoppage of the Mansarovar Yatra from one entry point. The Chinese have posted photographs of destruction. You have perhaps forgotten that on June 4, 2017, a few weeks ago, 2 Chinese army choppers violated Indian airspace. Where? In Chamoli district in Uttarakhand. On an earlier occasion, which we shared with you, Chinese helicopters came more than 4.5 kilometers into Indian territory, again in Uttarakhand. We are highly alarmed and concerned because the responses of the government in 1 or 2 cases have been actually very pitiable. I quote the Minister of State for Defence in a written reply to Parliament, quote unquote, he said, "No Chinese incursions, only transgressions." Perhaps the Minister of State for Defence should have supplied us a dictionary which tries to point out the difference without a distinction. or a distinction without a difference. When they say no Chinese incursions, only transgressions. Even a lawyer will blush with such a distinction. Then Mr. Rajnath Singh, the Honorable Home Minister, quote unquote said, Chinese intrusions are only perception. It's all right, we can get away with these statements, but when you have such a serious standoff and face-off, these responses by Indian very senior minister assume very great significance. Friends, I am not going to remind you in detail, but all this happens in the backdrop of Chinese daredevilry, Chinese unconcern, and Chinese complete lack of sympathy, what to talk of empathy, for issues like Masood Azhar, persistent objection and obstruction. For issues like NSG, persistent repetitive obstruction. Issues like UN Security Council membership. This is much worse because it is indirect, subterranean and direct. And then of course, we were very sorry to hear, and I am very sorry to say, that our longest term ally, Russia, extended support to China on the corridor issue. Few days after, we were treated to all kinds of optics and photo opportunities. And then of course, India's isolation. When we object and take a stand, we should not seem to be isolated. But we regretfully inform and remind you about India's isolation on the so-called CPEC economic corridor issue. $54 billion under our nose, and we appear to have become an isolated objector who is standing on the side, watching helplessly. Friends, I started and I am ending by reminding you that this is said with responsibility and restraint. But it is to be reminded to this country because nothing is more precious than our country, national security, national integrity, territorial integrity. I am asking myself whether this government's 3 years can be described in terms of either a reluctant Raksha Mantri or a part-time Raksha Mantri. India deserves better. It's not a question of Mr. A, Mr. B. I'm not at all on personalities. But with such serious issues, it is just not possible for part-time ministers to deal with such issues. And unfortunately, we have lurched from reluctant Raksha Mantris to part-time Raksha Mantris and vice versa. And vice versa. I must tell you also with great regret, deep regret, and I am really sorry to say this, that the government of India under the Congress devoted a scheme of 64,000 plus crore rupees. I repeat, rupees 64,678 crores with 90,000 odd additional troops. I repeat, 90,274 additional soldiers for what was known as Mountain Strike Corps. Mountain Strike Corps, basically 90% would be manning the Chinese border, Indo-Chinese border. We have asked through you earlier and I ask again, why was it kept in deep freeze? Why is it aborted? Where is this scheme gone? What has the BJP done? 64,000 crore rupee, 90,000 additional troops, precisely in the area where we are having these very, very serious problems.